Direct from Foxborough, Massachusetts, the gem of Norfolk County, and taped at the studios of Foxborough Cable Access. It's Foxborough Central, and here's your host, Bob Hickey.
Welcome to another great episode of Foxborough Central. My name is Bob Hickey. I am your host today. Thank you for taking a little bit of time to tune in, sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and talk about all the things that are great about Foxborough, the people, events, and organizations that make us the gem of Norfolk County. Speaking of events, we have maybe not an event in his own right, but Dennis Naughton is my guest today. How are you doing, Dennis?
Doing well, Bob.
It's good. It's good to have you here. We are going to talk today about all things Democrat. We're going to talk about local Democrat. We're going to talk about maybe some local politics, and quite frankly, on the national stage these days, there's a lot of dysfunction going on in Washington. And if you have the time, maybe we can delve into that a bit.
I hope we do have it. And again, as I say, I'm very happy to be here. I'd like an opportunity to talk about Democratic Town Committee and about democratic values in general, and perhaps what brought me and other people to become Democrats.
Perfect. And folks at home who are fans of the program, they know, or fans of Foxborough Cable Access, I should say, know that we do the live election coverage for the local elections, obviously. And in this past year, 2013, it was a combined state race and local race. So we had the opportunity to interview the local Republican had Angela Davis, and had a great opportunity to talk with Dennis. And Dennis, it was not only a good conversation, I really enjoy it, and I always enjoy talking to you, but you had mentioned a book as we were having our conversation, and our executive director had noticed a significant spike in hit activity on that. So I know people were watching, but we didn't really get to talk about that book.
I'm really encouraged to hear that people were interested in that as a follow-up, because what I want to stress about that, even though I'm a Democrat and I have have a, to that extent, a partisan point of view, I suppose, of things, I'm an American first. I think we all are. And there is a legitimate concern about, and I think dysfunction is not too strong a word, that's going on in D.C. Now, I know that various people are going to have various views of why that is, and they're going to cleave to those views, and because they're kind of dug in. Mm-hmm. But the book, which I brought with me this morning, it's even worse than it looks: How the American Constitutional System Collided with the New Politics of Extremism. Right. Is a book that I think is worth reading for every American. And I say that not only because of the content, but if I may, just for a moment, it's a very quick sketch of the authors.
And it's such a timely thing, and folks who watch more than cable access know that there's some significant issues going on in Washington, D.C., where they're unable to, really carry forward the basic job. This past week, depending upon when you're watching it, the Farm Bill is in serious trouble. Prior to that, you have judgeships that aren't being appointed. You have the failure of the legislature to pass a budget for multiple years. And so, this is very timely.
It is, I think. So you have a balance on the political spectrum of people who produced this book. Co-authored by Thomas Mann. Mann is the W. Averill Harriman Chair and Senior Fellow of Governance Studies at the Brookings Institution, which is understood to be a progressive or liberal think tank. And then on the other hand, Norman Ornstein of the American Enterprise Institute, and who people may know him. He writes a weekly column called A Roll Call. Okay, and so both of these gentlemen collaborated and did a really good analysis of how the problem evolved that we have now, what the problem is, who the players are, and also spin out a whole range of possible solutions, debunking a number of them that are sort of popular and coming up, with focusing on their own. And they don't see it as a short-range solution either, unfortunately, but highly recommended to anyone who really wants to get some insight on the problem in Washington.
Well, as you bring that up, and I suppose there is no easy fix, and as with any significant issue, it takes time and layer upon layer upon layer of of issues. And I'm sure that in Washington there have been, justifiable reasons on both sides of the aisle. Well, we're not going to do this because they did that, and we're not going to do this because they did it. And it sounds too much like a Middle East conundrum to really be able to just brush aside, well, just wait till the next elections. It's deeper than that, isn't it?
I think it is. My own personal observation is that the country is more divided now than probably it was in 1858, 59, 60, in the run-up to the Civil War. I'm not suggesting that's where we're going, but it's disturbing to see that it is that divided. I really agree that there's no simple fix. I think that, in 2010, I think there was a reaction that some people had was to go, let's just get people out of there and put other people in. And we resulted in the current, Congress that, as you said, just turned down the farm bill, but because there were poison pills built into it.
Right.
Okay, so that's that. Who doesn't want the farm bill? But
right.
if there are things in there that cause it to be, something that people can't rally behind, and that's what seems to be happening.
And that's interesting because also, again, depending upon when you're watching this, the whole idea behind the sequestration was that there's so many poison pills in it, so many bad things that would happen, so many draconian cuts, that there's no way people couldn't come to an agreement. And yet, here we are.
Yeah, I know. Well, there is a school of thought that dates back a while that says that, government is the problem. I mean, Ronald Reagan said that when he was running, in the late 70s. And of course, when you say government is the problem, then that, unfortunately, I think, evolved to government is the enemy. And I think that even plays into the people who are, amassing arms and ammunition and things like that because they think they're going to have to defend by force of arms, the United States, what they think the United States is. So I think there's been an unfortunate evolution of polarization that have gone along that idea that government is the problem. And so, it's ironic to me because it flies in the face of what the Founding Fathers said. They said we need to have a government. They were students of the old...
A strong centralized government to provide for the public welfare.
Social contract.
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
A social contract.
And it's interesting because, part of it also may simply be the prevalence today of talk radio and of quote-unquote information shows, news shows, that go for the extreme. Everybody's always talked about the 5% on the one side and the 5% on the other side, but it's the other 90% that really get things done. But who has the voice, unlike Foxborough Cable Access and Foxborough Central, where we give all points of view and we make it fair and easy. Ratings are typically generated from outlandish talk and something that'll really do the gotcha. I guess that's why TMZ is such I don't watch it, but TMZ is such a popular show because it's always about the gotcha and hey, we got that person. Yeah. And there was a conservative radio talk show host, I won't name, I don't listen to, but he said the best thing government can do for us is to take the summer off. And
see, there you go.
There you go.
Yeah.
You had mentioned earlier about some of the polarization, and you mentioned the war between the states, and what a great example that is of what is different now. Because back then, there was some issue. The issue of slavery had been predated the Constitution as one of those things we're going to put off. But even beyond that, as significant an issue as it was. There was also the simple matter of power control from states to the federal government. There was a mindset north of the Mason-Dixon for a stronger centralized government, a mindset south for a more for stronger state government. And of course, you can't be a truly united states without being united in soul as well as in name. And so that was obviously something that had to be hashed out. But then the economics of it, but you don't see that now. It's not. We don't have a situation of Alaska saying, well, we need our rights or else we're going to stop doing this. It seems to be more personal. It seems to be more individual lawmakers all
Texas
have their
did threaten to
needs
secede there for a while, not long ago. But I think you're right. That issue of state federal control has been a huge one, and I think the poster guy for that was John C. Calhoun and the Doctrine of Nullification. Back prior to the Civil War, war between the states, war of northern aggression, depending on... You are from Virginia.
I'm from Virginia. Oh, look at you. That's right. You know what? That slipped out. The Civil War, although there wasn't much civil about it. But
no, there was not. As we've read in the Foxborough Reporter time after time.
Jack Oswald did such a great job with that series.
Yeah, it's been very interesting.
Yeah, it has been.
But that's right. And I think, there's always been that strain there. And indeed, if you go back even to the idea of political parties, here you had John Adams from Massachusetts wishing that there weren't political parties, seeing them as a great evil. But look, whenever people share ideas, they're going to say, hey, let's work together. So that's where parties come from.
Right.
I always try to remind people, yes, I'm a Democrat, but I have a certain set of values first. Okay? I respect Republicans for the same thing. They have a certain set of values first. Or the Greens, they have a certain set of values first. And then they advocate for that through a party. It's when the party becomes more important than anything else, I think, that we start to get toward that slippery slope. And once again, I go back to that book.
I'm looking forward to reading that. It's even worse than it looks.
Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned that the parties become stronger because on the local level, there are really not party politics at the Board of Selectmen level, for example. Although there are trains of thought and people that align themselves.
Yes, and values differences.
Exactly. So your point is absolutely valid in that people will always align themselves with like-minded or like-thinking others because they want to accomplish something. If I were to become a member of the school committee, for example, and I wanted to put a new roof on a certain school, well, obviously I'm going to, well, maybe not obviously, it's not obvious to the people in Washington anymore, but should be obvious. What you do is you talk to people, you try to say, well, I want a roof here. And somebody says, well, yeah, but I want a crosswalk here. Well, maybe we can work together and accomplish some goals by working together and, not just saying, well, I'm not going to put a sidewalk in or a crosswalk in because I need this roof. Well, I'm not going to do a roof because I need a crosswalk, and we don't get anywhere.
Yeah.
And there doesn't seem to be a lot of deal making anymore.
No, I think the issue becomes, this is what I've seen, that if I can't advance the interests of my party, then I'm not going to do something good for the American people. Okay, and I think that's a very disturbing place to be. I want to make a comment about the press, too, just in general. When I was a kid, going to school, they used to talk about the press being the fourth branch of government, important checks and balances, so forth and so on. And of course, that's when there was a real diversity of press in this country. Printed media, which of course is rapidly disappearing.
Yes.
And then, of course, and you've got a situation now where you have smaller and smaller groups and even individuals owning huge media conglomerates who can actually shape the news. And because people are so busy, they don't take the time or they don't have the time to do any kind of in-depth analysis of the issue. So the sloganeering, unfortunately, becomes a thing that too many people are drawn in by.
Yeah,
and it's a non-rational approach to problem solving.
And in this society, what brings that is commercials, because they generate money, and that's generated from ratings. And for the assault on National Public Radio at the federal level, you saw, I'm sure you read it, I think it was 3 weeks ago, where NPR had to close some of their branch offices in the major cities for their news gathering operation. When that was very unfortunate because, again, that's a voice that maybe not everybody agrees with a certain aspect of reporting, just as people may not agree with Fox News or NBC or CNBC. But still, it's an important voice out there. And for that to shutter, it goes to this. You're getting less and less of a maybe, I don't want to say a right voice, but of an alternate viewpoint or an alternate approach.
Right.
And then you're left with the screaming heads and the...
Well, and it's clearly with PBS and NPR, you have a more considered approach to looking at the issues. You have more depth. You have more analysis. The kind of thing you used to get more routinely on CBS and NBC and ABC. I can still remember, as a young teacher, advocating to kids in my classroom, follow the news, listen to Eric Severide's analysis at the end of the CBS Evening News, if you can. We'll talk about that tomorrow, extra credit kind of thing. If people actually know what they're talking about, it appears that they watched it, kind of thing. And that's just gone. Even on local TV, you don't see people editorializing much anymore, you know, and it's a very unfortunate thing.
And since we're here talking with Dennis Naughton, who is the local, no, I'm going to get this wrong, you're the chairman of the local Democratic
Town Committee.
Town
right.
Committee.
It's an elected position from among the local Democrats. Our officers are the chair. There's also a vice chair, secretary, treasurer, and an outreach person. Okay. Those are the offices that are mandated by the state party, that you have to have those. State law says that any town committee, regardless of party, may have up to 35 members. Now, if you're in a city, that goes for wards. It's not the whole city of Boston has 35 members, okay? But in Foxborough, where we have a small community, it's 35 members. We have currently 30 members. My philosophy, and chairs before me, has been that we are not interested in having people who just want their name on the ballot and their name on the town committee, but that they need to be active, they need to do things, they need to deliver. For example, in the current, we're all working on this current election for Ed Markey for the open position left by John Kerry when he became Secretary of State. And so we meet once a month generally, although we are taking this July off after the
Always
election.
a good thing.
Yeah. And so our next meeting will be, generally meet on the second Monday of the month. It's been tricky, though. The McGinty Room has been very much in demand with the library being closed, so you have to kind of take what you can get. A person can always check our website at Foxborough, Foxborough, Dems, all one word, .org.
FoxboroughDems.org, spelled the company way.
That's right.
All right,
Yep.
very good.
And so we try to keep it reasonably current. It's all volunteer. We don't have a professional webmaster, but...
Well, I was going to say, I like your website. I do heavy research for my episodes of Foxborough Central so I can bring all the good information to you at home. I was on the website.
Good that everyone did so. Good for you, I say, Bob.
And there are helpful links. There's good information out there. You also have an interesting array of guest speakers coming in. And it's also publicized in the Foxborough Reporter, speaking of the print media. Shameless plug, get your Foxborough Reporter today. It's only $1, it's good stuff. But I've been really impressed by the level of, well, I don't even say level, but the variety. You had gun control.
We did. We had, I think it was in March, we had a piece that we billed as, just a discussion of gun violence. And we had a standing room only crowd. Many gun owners, turned up, and guests were, we had Chief of Police, O'Leary. Very, glad. I want to thank him here for being on our panel. And also 3 state legislators, including Republican Jay Barrows of the 1st Bristol District, because, this is an issue that affects all of us. And, again, as I say, we're citizens of Foxborough first, we're Americans first, and it's good to have a broad, analysis of the issues. And that was a great discussion. More recently, we've had a person out from the American Civil Liberties Union, Cade Crockford, who discussed the issue, Fourth Amendment issues, right to privacy, and we had that coming anyway. But then it turned out to also be related to the cameras that they're putting in the schools, which of course all of that's become a much hotter issue since more recent developments.
Right, and I would love to talk to you about that also. I don't know if we're gonna have enough time here because, as you know, these shows just fly right by. But so much I always want to talk to you about, Dennis, because I remember your wise voice at one of the town meetings back when I was a selectman, opposing surveillance cameras. And at the time, it was probably it was obviously well received because it went down to defeat. But a lot of what you said rang true. And then I was wondering what your take was on the school camera issue.
Well, first I understand a number of things. As a former principal, lifetime public educator.
Exactly.
I understand that you have a due diligence function that you must perform. When people send their children off to school every day, they're placing their most prized possessions in your hands. And in fact, legally, we act in loco parentis, in the place of parents, although that has been modified by the Supreme Court in some other cases I won't get into. But yes, and it is very important for the people to feel that their children are safe, and for the children themselves to feel safe. Having said that, I've spent time in schools that have surveillance cameras here in this area, and I never had a comfort level with them. Kids are kids. They do all kinds of things that don't need to be on camera. So it worries me how long the tapes will be kept, who the custodians will be. I did ask Debbie Spinelli, who's been very kind in communicating with me about this issue, if I could see the latest policy that was approved by the school committee at its most recent meeting. Now, these things I'm speaking about are personal. Our town committee has not taken any position on this issue. But since you asked,
but it's here now, and it's something that, given we'll go back years to Columbine, or we'll go just recently to Sandy Hook. But there's so many issues that people think cameras are going to be the panacea. If we have this, it's not going to be an issue anymore. And of course, as with all issues up in Washington D.C., there's so much more to it. As far as mental health, access to mental health services. Access to continuing services, to bridge the youth services to adulthood where there are no services except for the penal system. You get into situations...
Which is very expensive when you let those things go along the line and people end up there.
Extraordinarily expensive, and people
It's like that old ad, pay me now or pay me later.
Exactly. So the whole, and again, I'm very supportive of a safe school environment, and I have children in the Foxborough school system. You and your wife both lifelong educators, so
and our kids went through the
it's not an issue of people not understanding. It's a matter of, all right, you start going down a certain slippery slope, and where do you end up?
Right.
And that's always, I don't know if you read my columns, but it's always it's sort of a bell out there. So, all right, fine, this sounds great, but did you consider what the next step is? Because there's always a next step.
Right.
Unless you're in Washington, D.C., when they don't think there's a next step. But there's always a next step.
Right. I think the key is, in Foxborough or any community, who has the final say as to when, say, law enforcement is engaged? Because law enforcement has its role, educators have their role. And as I think I made an allusion to on town meeting floor when I was raising this issue, if a couple of kids have a quick dust up in the hallway, I guess you could call it assault and battery, but maybe you just want to take them to the woodshed. Because that's what principals do. That's what assistant principals do. That's what teachers do. What was wrong with you? Tell us what the issue was. Well, he said, no, I didn't say that. No. And peer mediation. When I was, for example, over in Norton as assistant principal for a year after I retired from Millis, we had a very nice peer mediation system at the guidance department. It solved 95% of the problems that kids had with each other, and it was usually a miscommunication. Somebody said that you said something about me or about my girlfriend. Usually it focuses around relationships, okay? And law enforcement doesn't need to be and shouldn't be involved in those kinds of things, all right? I don't think so. And frankly, principals have to make judgment calls about things like that.
As do law enforcement officers.
Yes.
So,
but when you call the police, and I think that, I don't want to be, taken wrong here. I think that Chief O'Leary is certainly on the right track in the way he's tried to deal with the schools. I know that Spinelli has spoken about that. But what I always worry about, it's the old idea. We're a government of laws, not of men. And we have, Chief O'Leary now, and we have, Superintendent Spinelli now. But we might have Attila the Hun at some point. You just never know how things are going to work out.
And that's an excellent point. I'm an old JC, and that is part of our credo. Government should be of laws, not of people. Yeah. And it's very true, because you create, and perhaps going back to government in the broader context, perhaps we create certain realities with the misunderstanding that this is the way it's always going to be, and it's never the way it's always going to be. There's no such thing as always.
That's right, and that's this is a huge aside, but when people counsel kids who have expressed a desire to end their own lives, that's what you talk about. This is just today. But kids haven't had much life experience.
Right, in
okay?
the context of their life, you're here, but the rest of us.
But I think there's an analogy there. People who don't pay attention to political issues think that's all there is, instead of looking at history and see how things evolve over time, particularly if people can be reasonable about the issues.
Folks at home, and again, I'm talking to Dennis Naughton, my guest today. And we're not really here talking about schools. We're here to talk about the Democratic Town Committee. And obviously, I get into good conversation with a good conversationalist, and I hope you're enjoying it. So let's circle it on back, and let's talk about the national situation, and then what we locally can or should be doing.
Well, I think if you take, just speaking in terms of like our own Democratic Town Committee, the values are shared, all right, across, and I'm sure that's true of other parties too, from the local up to the national, in terms of things for which we advocate. It's, in fact, I was looking at, I don't want to bore the audience, but we're doing the budget cuts on the 2014 budget now. And when you talk about values, this is a piece from the Saturday New York Times editorial, and I won't go into details. But what it does is it says, well, here's what the Democrats want to do with the budget. Here's what the Republicans want to do with the budget.
Okay.
And it's a classic example of a values clash. And just maybe take one example, okay? Let's see. Obviously, the Democrats would want to retain money for renewable energy programs, all right? Because as we know, President Obama has been big on that. He talks about that as a way of building jobs. Also, Governor Deval Patrick has talked about renewable energy as well.
Of course, as long as it's not my backyard.
Well, it's, I guess a lot of people feel that way. We just went through that in Falmouth.
And I'm just kidding, but
Yeah. Personally, I'd love to have a windmill
I
nearby.
was just going to
say. But the Republican budget wanted to cut half to $1 billion from renewable energy at the same time that they wanted to put an extra $450 million for developing coal, natural gas, oil, and fossil fuels. So there's a classic difference in values. Another one is, cut $120 million. Republicans wanted to cut $120 million from the Commodity Futures Trading Commission to enforce the Dodd-Frank oversight law. Again, it's been irritating to Democrats at all levels that the Dodd-Frank was passed, but there's been an emasculation of its effectiveness via non-funding.
Right. A law is great, but if you don't have the ability to enforce it, then it becomes rather toothless.
And quite honestly, it's been obstructed by the House of Representatives, which is Republican controlled. And I shouldn't even say that. I should say Tea Party controlled.
I was going to say that the issue is a little bit broader than that, though, in that for every obstructionist act, there's always a justification. Well, so-and-so didn't support me on this, so I'm not going to support it. And at some point, they have to come together and say, all right, we need to be functional. We need to be able to get something done. The art of compromise is nobody gets everything they want, but we all get enough of what we need to make it work. And right now, it seems as though that level of understanding is just completely absent up on Capitol Hill.
You're right, and I think back, because I'm old, I think back to when...
Your beard is much grayer than mine.
I was a kid, and Charlie Halleck and Everett Dirksen would do the Evan Charlie show at the end of the week, okay? One being, the ranking Republicans in each branch, okay, Senate and House. And, I always found, there was a convivial, humorous atmosphere about that. There were no personal attacks when they talked about disagreements with the Democrats. And the Democrats weren't doing that in reverse. Oh, occasionally, of course, that's the nature of the people. But the ethos wasn't that. That wasn't the primary thing. And in those days, people stayed in Washington. They didn't run home on the weekends the way they do now. And there was a whole level of, they went out for a few drinks. They had dinner. They had a chat. They knew about each other's families. Sure. They got to care about each other. I think the last time I saw that was when Dick Lugar came to Ted Kennedy's funeral, and there were tears rolling down his cheeks during the speeches, that were, commemorating his death there at his funeral. And here were two old war horses from the era I'm talking about, okay? Gone. That kind of thing has just gone. And ironically, think about it, that same Dick Lugar was unseated, a long-term senator, was unseated by a more right-wing Republican because he got primaried in his own state, and they got rid of him.
Some would say that's the beauty of democracy, and some would say that's the incurable failing of it.
What was his sin? Lugar's sin was he used to compromise on the issues.
Yep.
And so right now, if you compromise on the issues in the Republican Party, you're going to get primaried, and you're going to maybe get dumped.
And perhaps also in the Democratic Party, if you're seeing as being too far to the right, there's always some lion that'll come up on the left and say, hey, you know what? This is what we really need to do for. And
I agree.
I think that's true even outside of the two main parties. You'll see what used to be fringe candidates, but now you'll see it more and more where people say, well, I'm too far right for the Republicans, and that's why you should vote for me, because I'm the real way. And same thing, I'm sure, on the left. So, Dennis, I got to tell you, it's been a pleasure. We haven't even touched half the things I wanted to touch upon.
No. Well, maybe
our time was already. I would hope so. I hope you'll come back again.
It's been great.
You get the
Thanks
last word. Dennis Naughton, chairman of the local Democratic Town Committee, and to get in touch with the local committee, you would contact.
You could contact me at 508-543-6214 or at naughden@verizon.net. Either one of those. You can go on again to our website. You can follow our sporadic twittering.
Are you on Facebook?
And we are on Facebook.
Be a friend on Facebook, and hopefully you'll see this show on the channels, or perhaps there's a link there. And their website again is www.foxboroughdims.org.
Yes.
.org, spelled the O-R-O way. I'm Bob Hickey, your host. Thank you for spending this very fast half hour with me and Dennis Naughton, my guest. If you'd like to see a replay of this, check out your local cable station or check us out on the web at www.fcatv.org. My thanks sincerely to Betty Travers, Deb Stores behind the cameras, Gary Nash behind the glass, and Mike Weber, our executive director. We hope to see you next time on this very same place for Foxborough Central. Take care, everybody.